Welcome to the stories on Echoes of Revenge. Step into a world where love turns dangerous, revenge feels inevitable, and every story drags you deeper into the shadows of desire, betrayal, and the human heart. Let's begin today's story. The restaurant was the kind of place where they didn't list prices on the menu. My sister Natalie had chosen it, naturally, for her birthday celebration. She sat at the head of the table in her new Chanel dress, the one I'd unknowingly paid for through the trust fund she thought came from our late grandmother's estate. "Sophie, did you even look at the menu?" Natalie asked, her voice carrying across the table. "Or are you calculating whether you can afford an appetizer on your little bank salary?" The table laughed. Mom, Dad, Uncle James, Aunt Claire. All of them enjoying the joke at my expense. I was 34 years old and my family thought I was a bank teller. "I'll manage," I said quietly, reviewing emails on my phone. The Federal Reserve had just approved our latest interest rate recommendation. My team's economic models had been accurate within 0.02%. A new record. "She'll get the chicken," Natalie told the waiter dismissively. "Cheapest thing on the menu. Sophie's always been so careful with money. Hasn't she, Mom?" "Well, banking doesn't pay what it used to," Mom said charitably. "Not everyone can be as successful as Natalie. Her marketing agency is thriving." Natalie's marketing agency had 3 clients and generated approximately $47,000 annually. The rest of her 6-figure lifestyle came from the trust fund I'd established 5 years ago, designed to make monthly distributions she believed were inheritance payments. What my family didn't know: I was Sophie Chin, Deputy Director of the Internal Revenue Service. I oversaw tax policy for the entire United States. My annual salary was $185,000, but my real wealth came from strategic investments made during my years as an economist at the Federal Reserve. Current net worth: $43 million. But they thought I counted coins at a local bank branch. "How much do bank tellers even make?" my cousin Derek asked. "Like 30,000? "Sophie makes a bit more than that," Dad said generously. "She's been there 10 years. Probably up to 40 by now." I made $185,000. Plus bonuses. Plus investment returns that had cleared $3.2 million last quarter alone. "The important thing is she's employed," Natalie said, patting my hand condescendingly. "Not everyone needs to be ambitious. Some people are content with simple lives." My phone buzzed. A text from Director Morrison, the IRS Commissioner. "The investigation is complete. Your sister and parents have been filing fraudulent returns for 6 years. Grand jury indictment approved. When do you want to move forward?" I'd suspected something was wrong 8 months ago when Natalie had casually mentioned a tax refund of $85,000. No one with her income level gets refunds that large. I'd asked my forensic accounting team to quietly review her returns. What they'd found was staggering. Natalie had been claiming fake business expenses, invented charitable donations and non-existent dependents. She'd falsified documents, created shell companies, and systematically defrauded the government of approximately $340,000 over 6 years. Worse, she taught Mom and Dad to do the same thing. Their tax consultant, actually Natalie's boyfriend's cousin, had been running a fraud scheme and my family had enthusiastically participated. I typed back, "Tonight. Dessert course." "Sophie, put that phone away," Mom scolded. "We're having family time." "Sorry. Work emergency." What emergency could a bank teller possibly have? Natalie laughed. "Did someone's checking account not balance?" The table erupted in laughter. Natalie raised her champagne glass. "Dom Perignon, $400 a bottle. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Especially my amazing parents who've always supported me. And Sophie, of course, for being Sophie." More laughter. I smiled politely. "Oh, and I have an announcement." Natalie beamed. "I'm buying a house. A beautiful 4-bedroom in Westchester. $2.8 million. The trust fund from Grandma is finally paying off." Dad raised his glass. "That's our successful daughter. Always making smart investments." The house purchase would be funded entirely by the trust I'd created. Money I'd given her while she called me a failure. "Sophie, maybe Natalie can give you some financial advice," Uncle James suggested. "Help you invest your little savings." "Maybe," I said. My phone buzzed again. Director Morrison, team is ready. We're 5 minutes out. At exactly 8:47 p.m., Director Richard Morrison entered the restaurant with 3 IRS criminal investigation agents and 2 attorneys from the Department of Justice. The conversation died instantly. Sophie. Director Morrison approached our table, his presence commanding immediate attention. Sorry to interrupt your dinner. Director Morrison. I stood, shaking his hand professionally. Family, this is Richard Morrison. He's the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. My boss. Natalie's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Your boss. Sophie is Deputy Director of the IRS, Morrison said, his voice carrying authority. She oversees tax policy and enforcement for the entire country. Has for 3 years now. Silence. Complete absolute silence. Before that she was senior economist at the Federal Reserve, Morrison continued. One of the youngest people ever appointed to that position. Currently she's one of the most powerful people in federal tax administration. Mom's face had gone white. Sophie, what is he talking about? I'm Deputy Director of the IRS, Mom. I have been for 3 years. Before that I worked at the Fed for 8 years. I've never been a bank teller. But you said you worked at a bank. Dad started. I said I worked in banking. The Federal Reserve is technically a bank. You all assumed I meant retail banking. I never corrected you because I wanted to see how you'd treat me without the title. This is insane, Natalie said, her voice shaking. You're lying. You're just trying to. Director Morrison, I said calmly, would you like to present your findings? Morrison pulled out a tablet displaying tax documents on the screen. Natalie Chin. 6 years of fraudulent tax returns. Fake business expenses totaling $180,000. Invented charitable donations of $95,000. Non-existent dependents claimed for $65,000 in credits. Total fraud, approximately $340,000. Natalie's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. Patricia and David Chin, Morrison continued, turning to my parents. 4 years of fraudulent returns. Similar patterns. Total fraud, approximately $140,000. All 3 of you used the same tax preparer, Marcus Webb, currently under federal indictment for running a fraud scheme involving 43 clients. We didn't know it was fraud, Dad stammered. You signed the returns, one of the DOJ attorneys said. You certified under penalty of perjury that the information was accurate. That makes you legally responsible. The penalty for tax fraud of this magnitude, Morrison said, is typically 5 to 7 years federal prison, plus full restitution, fines and penalties. You're looking at owing approximately $800,000 combined, plus potential prison sentences. Mom started crying. Dad looked like he might vomit. Sophie, Natalie's voice was desperate now. Tell them this is a mistake. You can fix this. You're at the IRS. I can't fix deliberate fraud, I said quietly. And I wouldn't if I could. You've been stealing from the government for 6 years while calling me a failure. While mocking my little bank job and my simple life. We didn't know you were. You never asked. For 10 years you assumed I was nobody. You never asked about my actual job, my responsibilities, my life. You just decided I was a failure and treated me accordingly. The trust fund, Natalie whispered. Grandma's trust fund. The monthly payments. There is no grandmother's trust fund. Grandma left you nothing. She left everything to me because I was the only one who visited her in the nursing home. I created the trust fund, Natalie. I've been giving you $8,000 monthly for 5 years. Money you spent while calling me poor. Morrison pulled out official documents. Natalie Chin, you're being served with a federal grand jury subpoena. Patricia and David Chin, same. You're required to appear before a grand jury next month. Criminal charges will be filed within 60 days. The IRS agents distributed the subpoenas. Official documents, federal seals, the weight of the United States government behind every word. Your house purchase in Westchester, I said to Natalie. The trust fund stops today. Immediately. Hope you didn't already make an offer. Sophie, please, Mom begged. We're family. You can't do this to us. You did this to yourselves. I gave you money. I supported you. And you repaid me by committing federal crimes while treating me like I was worthless. What do we do? Dad asked desperately. You hire criminal defense attorneys, Morrison said. Good ones. Federal tax fraud cases have a 93% conviction rate. The evidence against you is overwhelming. After they left, Morrison, the agents, the attorneys, my family sat in stunned silence among the ruins of Natalie's birthday celebration. I'm sorry, Natalie finally whispered. Sophie, I'm so sorry. We didn't mean. You meant every word. Every joke. Every condescending comment. You just didn't expect consequences. I stood, leaving cash on the table for my meal. The trust fund is dissolved. The monthly payments stop immediately. What happens with the criminal charges is between you and the Department of Justice. Where are you going? Mom asked. Home. To my penthouse in Georgetown. The one you've never visited because you assumed I couldn't afford anything nice. I walked out of the restaurant, leaving them with their subpoenas and their shattered illusions. 3 months later, the plea agreements were finalized. Natalie, 18 months federal prison, $340,000 restitution, 5 years probation. My parents, 1 year each, $140,000 restitution, 3 years probation. They'd avoided trial by pleading guilty. The judge had been harsh but fair. Natalie called from prison once. I lost everything. The house fell through. My agency collapsed. My friends abandoned me. All because you reported us. All because you committed federal crimes, I corrected. I just stopped enabling you. She hung up. My parents wrote letters. Apologizing. Begging for help with legal fees, with restitution payments. I didn't respond. Director Morrison mentioned it at our next policy meeting. Your family situation. Are you all right? I'm fine. They made their choices. You made the right call. Personal relationships can't compromise institutional integrity. I nodded. But late at night in my Georgetown penthouse they'd never seen, I sometimes wondered if there had been another way. Then I'd remember Natalie's laugh. She works at some bank. And I'd know I'd done exactly what needed to be done. The bank teller had turned out to be the IRS deputy director. And tax fraud has consequences. Even for family. Especially for family who should have known better.